What is going on, guys? Welcome back. Ryan Moody, Jimmy Smith, our MMA show. Appreciate you guys so much with the support. I've been trying to interact with you guys in the comment section as you tell me I know nothing of which I speak and annoy the heck out of you, but I appreciate you listening anyway. This is a rare moment, a Bellator preview. Does it take you back just a little bit, Jimmy, to talk Bellator?
Yeah, it does. Yeah, it does. I mean, a lot of the talent on this card's, homegrown in Bellator. I called a lot of their fights. So yeah, it does kind of take me back. It's true.
A sentimental Jimmy Smith. Now, I will say, before we get into this, generally when we do Bellator, it's only co-main and main. You kind of had mentioned it there in the beginning. Good to see, in my opinion, a Bellator heavy card. Yes, you've got Pettis. Yes, you've got Curtis Millender. Yes, you've got Cyborg. But for the most part, this is a card they put together. I also mentioned you're going to have Aaron Pico. Usually when we talk about Pico, we're referring to John Jones, but in this case, it's a Bellator fighter. He had really gotten a heavy push. He's on the prelims here, so you can also see a nice little structuring from Bellator. So altogether, things that you like to see. Now, I will offer to you earlier today, I saw some comments, or tomorrow by the time you guys hear this, some comments from Luke Thomas that compare these cards going head-to-head. Personally, I'm always a little bit hesitant to put Bellator head-to-head with UFC because, to be fair, they're just light years apart. And I feel like when you have to compare them, you're elevating Bellator to a status that they can't always hold as kind of a lower level league. And then you're also kind of drowning down UFC a little bit and kind of speaking negatively about a card to a degree. I will say, listen, these fights all could be entertaining. It is a balanced card, I think, in both aspects, but I don't think we need to continue to project these Bellator to UFC comparisons.
I get where Luke is coming from in that when I look at this Bellator card, I think it's incredibly entertaining. Meaning, I have 2 hours to check out a fight card. I'm thinking which one will really be worth my time entertainment-wise. Neither of them cost any money. I'm not worried about is the winner the best in a particular category in the world. I think Bellator stacks up very well. It's a very entertaining card. I want to watch fun fights and sit in front of my TV and have a good time. I think the Bellator card lines up very well with the UFC card. That's how I think he meant it, is in entertainment value. Bellator, a lot of these fights are evenly matched. There are enough big names to be interesting, but I think stylistically, we're going to get some really good fights out of this one.
I agree with that. I just think, unfortunately, whenever you have somebody of Luke's stature coming out and speaking to this, unfortunately, the rhetoric that it turns to is the narrative of Bellator second fiddle. And it just kind of reinvigorates fans that feel that way. And then it ultimately becomes, well, the UFC must have a horrible card if it's, capable of competing with, the Bellator card that week. To get into the actual fights, we'll start with a girl that doesn't need much introduction in Cris Cyborg. Julia Budd will defend her featherweight world title. And to me, I think Cris Cyborg was one of the best female fighters in the world for a very long time. Obviously, the loss to Amanda Nunes, kind of a less than stellar performance we saw from her against Felicia Spencer, rather. I think she has something to prove here in Bellator. I really do. And obviously not just a belt to win. We talked a little bit earlier that this could be a rare moment where somebody could hold a Strikeforce, UFC, and Bellator title. That's probably going to be a rare accomplishment. In terms of what she brings to the table, great power, great right hook. I mean, she'll knock a girl out. Does a really nice job at mixing in body shots to drop those hands. Bud, listen, this girl, if you check the record, you might not know she's got losses to Ronda Rousey and Amanda Nunes, two of the elite fighters from the past couple years. And I think this, is really an interesting fight. I think we haven't seen Cyborg's ground game get tested at all. And Julia Budd has some really good takedowns, some really good ground and pound. I don't know if she's going to go there, but she also has some good kicks. And I think, honestly, this is going to be a bigger test for Cris Cyborg than people think. I'm not sure she's going to be able to hold up to the pace and the pressure and the volume of Cyborg. And I think this is going to be a late finish for Cris to win. But I think on paper, this is a lot more balanced fight than people give it credit for, and just what we've seen from Cris Cyborg walking through girls in the past.
Here's the issue for me, having called a lot of Julia Budd's fights in Bellator. If she fought how she looked, she'd be undefeated for sure. What I mean by that is incredibly strong, big for the weight class. Cyborg's not going to be able to push her around. I remember the Arlene Blencowe fight, her first one. Got out with a decision. The next fight was against Marloes Coenen, who is a legend, one of the pioneers in women's MMA. And she kicked Marloes' ass. I love Marloes Coenen. She just got beat up in that fight. We thought, okay, she's kind of turning a corner because Julia Budd, up to that point, had won 4 decisions in a row. She wasn't a killer, hadn't had a finish yet in Bellator, winning close decisions against fighters who weren't that good, and she just didn't seem able to pull the trigger. Marloes Coenen came out, a veteran, said some things about Julia Budd's heart that Julia Budd took personally, and Julia Budd flattened her. And we thought, okay, wow, she's really realizing now all her physical talent. She's going to be a terror. In the next fight against Arlene Blencowe, she barely won. I thought she lost, I think, if I remember correctly. And she, once again, couldn't pull the trigger. Just kind of standing there a lot of the time. So a very, very boring fight. Wasn't aggressive, wasn't throwing combinations against Blencowe, who didn't do that much. Just angled and kind of threw a jab and had the occasional big punch. And I thought she lost a fight. Once again, if I remember correctly, because I know she fought her twice. And then against Nogueira and then Rubin, her next 2 fights, she gets knockouts. It's the inconsistency so far in Bellator where it seemed like, oh, wow, she's really going to start turning them on. She's so much stronger and bigger and more athletic and usually faster and more powerful than everybody she fights. But it's that joke. I was talking to somebody when I was working in Bellator, and we were off camera, whatever. It was, I think, after one of Julia's fights. And they said, that meme with the kitten looking at the mirror and seeing a lion, like, oh, visualize what you want to be or whatever. It's the other way around for Julia. It's like she looks in the mirror and sees a smaller person, or like, it's crazy. Like, you don't realize how much stronger you are than the person in front of you, or faster. I mean, her physical talent's off the chart, but she just wasn't that aggressive. So my question in this fight is the biggest name of her career. Of course, she fought Ronda Rousey. That was in 2011. Fought Amanda Nunes once again in 2011, a long time ago. Beat Jermaine Durandamy. Does fighting a name like Cris Cyborg make her more or less confident and more or less aggressive? She goes out and does everything she knows how to do. She can at least give Cyborg a great fight. But if she comes out and is hesitant in any way, once Cyborg feels that, you're done. You're done. Nunes came out there and literally punched her in the mouth and was the aggressor and imposed her will. And for the first time in her career, really, Cyborg found herself on her back foot, backpedaling, trying to catch up with punches, and it didn't work. I think Julia Budd's going to need that kind of performance. She cannot hesitate.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen what beats Cris Cyborg. It's listen, a lot of girls, I think, get beat before they get in the ring with her. I think they look at the name, they look at the size, they look at her legacy to the sport, and they get overwhelmed by the moment. Now, you mentioned eloquently, Julia Budd is not going to be that girl. I mean, she may have a internal struggle with who she is, but make no mistake, she's fought some of the best. I don't think she's going to get lost in the star power of Cris Cyborg. I think she knows exactly who she's going up against. But, will we see that Cris Cyborg? Have we seen that Cris Cyborg the last 2 fights? I personally don't think that we have. Whether that's, age, whether that's what she does outside of the cage, whether this is something she still wants to do. Okay, she does a lot of positive things outside of MMA. She's also went through a lot of camp changes. Tito Ortiz was with her for a while. Those things have kind of started to change, and they have an effect on a fighter. And it's odd to see someone go from, I mean, there was times where we didn't think she was going to get to the UFC, right? She was just going to be pushed away as she gets there. She does, conservatively well. And then now, I mean, listen, she's back in kind of the B League, if you will. She gets an immediate title shot. I mean, if she's the old Cyborg, this is going to be a walk in the park. But I think Julia Budd is not going to fall for the same mystique a lot of girls have. And I think you're going to see a very balanced fight. I don't think she has enough to beat her, because I've seen Cris Cyborg just dominate. But yeah, I mean, you said it perfectly. If she can get Cyborg to second guess, where she doesn't immediately fall into, oh, this girl's got power, this girl's too strong for me, then yeah, this can really go, I think, in her way. I see Cyborg winning more ways than I see Bud winning at this point.
Well, another thing too is that what we saw in the Nunes fight is the tactical limitations that that Cyborg faces. Meaning, when she got hit and got hurt, a good example: Floyd Mayweather had been hurt in a couple early fights. Sugar Shane Mosley hurt him. Zab Judah was had some success in early rounds. He made the right adjustments. The guy just boxes so well. You can hurt him early. It doesn't really, okay, he starts moving and dancing and outboxing you. And Cyborg, under duress, just knew how to fire back. It's like I'd always been bigger and stronger and able to kind of brawl my way back into fights. And when she got hurt and was facing someone who could hit as hard as she could, she didn't have the tactical answers. We didn't see great defense. We didn't see great footwork. We didn't see great head movement. We didn't see great counterpunching. It was, oh shit, I just got hit. I got to hit back. Okay, that's not going to get you out of every situation. You know, it's one of those things where she was always physically able to do that. And against Nunes, we saw that tactically, she didn't have the skills to do anything but try and hit hard back. And when you're behind in punches, that doesn't often work. So we've seen those limitations. Can Julia Budd exploit them? That's the question.
You'd mentioned in prior podcasts that you felt it was good for a fighter to lose early because it helps kind of build the resolve. Now, I know people will go back and point at the record and say, yeah, her first fight was a loss. I don't know that I've ever seen her fight against Erica Piez in Show Fight 2. But from what I can tell, when, for the most part, we got Cris Cyborg on a big stage, Elite XC Strikeforce, obviously Invicta, she was just a mauler for a very long time. She was just beating girls and then beating good girls and then, you know, beating some of the best girls. You know, I know you like to kind of downplay Holly Holm's significance, but she got a lot of these girls in their prime. Do you think that that's a part of this too? Is that she didn't have more early setbacks to kind of test, hey, this is how I can respond in these moments? Because to be honest, you know, the Amanda Nunes fight was quick, really quick, but it looked like once she got that initial flurry, she didn't have any answers. And it was, you know, open and shut case. And like I said, I actually thought she lost the fight against Spencer. I know, you know, it was guess kind of a weird way to put that. I had set such a high expectation for Cris Cyborg that even a win was going to feel like a loss to me. You know what I mean? Like, I just expected her to do a lot better, even though she clearly won the fight. I probably didn't mean to put that the exact way I said it, but my expectations for her weren't met. And, you know, now you see her going down a rung in the ladder.
Look, here's the deal, is that when you have Cris Cyborg's physical advantages, most fighters are just going to fall. You know, it's just most female fighters in a division that has always been extremely thin just can't keep up with Cris Cyborg. So you could say she was the victim of early success, but I mean, how many fighters were anywhere near as strong or as fast or as durable or as powerful as Cris Cyborg? Nobody. So would it have helped her to get a loss early? Maybe, but she was just so dynamic and explosive and bigger and badder and meaner than everybody that it's unlikely. It's unlikely. It's almost like, you know, a young Mike Tyson was just heads and tails above everybody in the division at the time. Same thing with Cris Cyborg. She was just heads and tails above everybody. Kind of the division and women's MMA period, I think, kind of had to catch up to her a little bit. So I don't know if it would have been possible to get her any more losses in the beginning, as far ahead as she was of everybody physically and tactically.
I guess a better way to put in perspective what I meant was we see it now with Kayla Harrison where, you know, she sets an expectation for herself. When she doesn't meet that expectation, she sees that as a loss mentally. So you do have girls in a way that are so good that come in with such capability of what they can do that when they don't, you know, do that to the most proficient level possible, that she may look at that, you know, this was a fight that I should have dominated. And even though I did, it wasn't, you know, what I'm accustomed to doing, getting some girl out, making this look very one-sided, having somebody go the full fight with me. So that was kind of better, a much better way of putting what I was trying to say. With that said, though, we'll move on because that's probably the longest we've ever broke down, one fight. So moving on to the co-main event in the featherweight quarterfinal, Darian Caldwell, Adam Borics. Borics undefeated, looked exceptional in his win over Pat Curran. Very well-rounded fighter. I love his explosion, great knees, body headshots. Caldwell, to me, trying to think about a very good way I can put this and not be negative, Jimmy, because apparently we're very negative. He's becoming a bit of a laborious fighter to watch. He usually pursues the ground game, doesn't then kind of aggressively pursue a finish. So to me, I really look at a fight here that you wouldn't maybe have matchmakers put together, but obviously the tournament does this for them naturally. I think this is going to be a really good showcase for Borics, and I think he is going to actually come out and knock Caldwell out.
Here's the issue for me. Darian Caldwell has had the same problems stylistically in his MMA career that he had when he was a wrestler. If you saw him wrestle, which I did at the Division I level, he could smoke anybody for the first period or two. His famous match against Brett Metcalf, where Metcalf was a returning national champion, was smoking everybody, and Caldwell came out and just tossed him around. Scored, I forget how many points in the first period, and then what happened? Metcalf starts coming back, and Darian Caldwell had to hang on at the end and ended up winning. But he's had the pacing issue his entire career, from wrestling to MMA. He'll explode, then he needs a break. Then he explodes, and he needs a break. And he just can't physically perform any other way. And what we're seeing, especially with the Henry Corrales fight last time, is a fighter, and you saw the fight before against Horiguchi, who is trying to pace himself better, but it's leading to, once again, a more, as you say, laborious style, where he'll take fighters down and try and rest up and do some ground and pound that's efficient, but he's trying to fight his own instincts. He's trying to fight his own natural explosiveness, and when he does that, it can be a problem. Now, if you look at even the fights he's won, when he took the title from Eduardo Dantas, explode, get on top, ground and pound. When you stand up, he does the same thing over and over and over again. But he's had issues fighting consistently for entire rounds and therefore entire fights. That's been a problem, especially add in this is not his natural weight class. He's moving up. He's taking on bigger talent, naturally stronger guys that are harder to hold down in these situations. I think it's a win for Borics as well.
In the least nice way of putting it, Jimmy, his fights became a little boring to watch, is what I was what I was saying.
100%.
So I'm hoping that doesn't happen.
I'm picking up what you're putting down. I get the code. I cracked the code. I know what's up.
Is it wrong of me to want to see somebody get knocked out because they're a boring fighter? I feel like that's a really bad thing.
Not at all. Go for it. Doesn't matter. You're okay.
Well, I'm sure somebody will really dislike that comment, though. We both kind of want the boringer fighter to get knocked out. We can't appease everyone, Jimmy.
I don't necessarily want Darian Caldwell to get knocked out. I'm just saying Adam Borics is most likely to win that way, I think. It's just, I like Darian Caldwell a lot. I mean, like I said, I called his fights in Bellator. Really nice guy, great interview, a lot of fun to be around. I really like the guy. But I think in this case, Borics has the tactical and physical advantages. And he's a hell of a finisher.
I don't think they would have made this match if it wasn't for the tournament. Do you agree?
Probably not, no. No, it's not a good matchup for Caldwell at all.
These are the good things tournament fighting can get us, right?
Yeah, for sure. It just takes the promotion's hands off the wheel, and whatever happens, happens. And there's a certain purity to that fans appreciate.
Yeah, no, I've always loved the tournament style. I understand why we can't get it in the UFC, but at the same time, Bellator has taken full advantage of it and even brought it back when it wasn't working for them. And now, obviously, we see a really decent card put together by them. So fantastic for everyone over at Bellator. And like you said, it's going to lead to a very interesting weekend with both these cards. With that said, we obviously will be covering the additional UFC card as well, but we appreciate you guys checking this out, and we will be back very shortly with more commentary.